How do? Welcome back to the garage. Today I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm making salami, and I thought, well, I'll video myself and show you how I go about making salami. It's a bit like brewing beer in that once you've tried fresh salami that you've made yourself, you don't really go back to the shop bought stuff, or only if you have to. But basically it's very easy. It takes about, when you're used to it, it takes about half an hour to put together, maybe 1 hour, when you're first starting, and it's ready in a month to eat. So what I'm going to do is show you the ingredients and give you some tips. First tip is sanitation. We're dealing with raw meat. Everything has to be sprayed down. This is Star San. Make sure everything's clean. I've already done that because we are dealing with the raw meat, and we want to make sure everything's clean. So that's your first tip. Just like brewing, just make sure everything is nice and sanitized. Now the ingredients you need is obviously meat, pork meat. Although you can make salamis with beef, venison, any sort of meat. But traditionally it's thought of as a pork dish, pork sausage, and ideally you want a fatty cut of meat, so something with about 20 to 30% fat. I find in supermarkets, now some people say you shouldn't really use pre-made supermarket mince because you don't know conditions that it's been produced in. Well, I think today we can pretty much guarantee that the sanitary conditions at a meat processing plant. I've never had any problems at all using pre-ground supermarket meat. Today what I usually do is actually go to my butcher's and I ask for about 1 kilogram of minced pork shoulder, because pork shoulder naturally has that 20 to 30% fat ratio. If I'm using a leaner cut of meat, say like a loin that I've minced up, then I would add some either back fat, which you have to get from a butcher's. Not many, I don't think any supermarkets sell back fat. Or if you are buying from a supermarket and you can only find lean cuts of mince, then you can use pork belly and just use about 20% of the weight, 30% of the weight in pork belly, which you can dice up very, very small chunks. So that's an alternative. But in my local supermarket, Morrison's, they have these savors, savour range. So it's like budget mince, and you usually find that the budget mince is more fatty, and it does actually say on the packet 20% fat. So that's pretty much ideal. It's 450 grams, 454 to be precise, and it just costs £2. So I bought 2 of them, and I'm going to be making 900 grams of salami. I usually like to go around about the kilogram, because then it makes all the maths easy. And yes, there's a little bit of mathematics to do, because the next ingredient is salt. Now some people say you shouldn't use normal table salt like this is, because it has an anti-caking agent and that can interfere with the fermentation. I've never had a problem, and I've had good fermentations just using the salt, normal table salt. So that's all I use. If I have a natural organic salt, sea salt, something like that, then sure, I'll use it. But if I want to make some salami and I don't have any, and I did forget to buy some this weekend, I just use table salt and it works fine. But what you need is 30%, and this is, 3%, not 30. My God, you won't be able to eat it with that much salt in. 3%, the weight of the meat in salt, and that's very important. Well, shall we say, between 2% and 3%. Anything less than 2%, it's just a flavouring, it's just a condiment. What you want is the salt to cure and to help preserve the meat, and you can only do that if you've got, let's just say, 2.5% the weight of the meat in salt. So that's very important. 2.5–3% the weight of the meat in salt. The other ingredients I'm going to be using is half a teaspoon. I've actually got the recipe down here. Half a teaspoon of chili flakes, just red chili flakes. I'm going to use a teaspoon, is it? Yeah, a teaspoon of ground black pepper. Another half teaspoon of garlic powder. These are granules, but it'll be okay. And then it also asks for a teaspoon, is it? Yeah, 1 teaspoon of black peppercorns. So basically we have these, you know, the grinders that you can get in the shops. I just take the top off and I'll just take the peppercorns out of there. So yeah, you've got a teaspoon of black pepper ground and a teaspoon of peppercorns. And for the sort of aromatics, that's all it is. It's just the garlic, the chilli. Oh, sorry, I haven't brought it with me. I'll have to go and get it. Chili powder, half a teaspoon of chili powder as well. Pepper, garlic, chilies, that's it. That's all the aromatics. However, these are fermented sausages. The first 3 days, so today's Sunday, so Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, they're going to be hanging room temperature, and they're going to ferment during that time. And so what we use is dextrose. How much? 2 teaspoons, so you don't need a lot, or about 12 grams dextrose. Dextrose is a sugar, as we all know as home brewers. You can actually use table sugar, sucrose, just normal kitchen table sugar. I have read, I've never used it, but I have read it gives a tanginess, adds a little bit of a tanginess to the flavour of the sausage. And I suppose that's a little bit like with home brewing. Sometimes you can get like a tanginess in the beer when you've used kitchen sucrose, table sugar, as opposed to dextrose. And I think it's exactly the same thing with sausages as well. Interestingly, some of the recipes do actually call for just normal sugar or a mixture of sugar and dextrose. So I suppose it depends on the style and how tangy the style, you know, the sausage is. I don't know. Oh, and then of course, because it's fermenting, it's not that, it's this. A starter culture. This is bacteria. So it's not yeast. This is a bacteria, and this is going to consume the sugar during the fermentation, those first 3 days. And this will help to protect the meat and to stop any other sort of bad bacteria forming colonies in the sausage. This is going to just make a nice colony and sort of like ward off any other nasties. And then also there is one other ingredient, and that's what's called pink salt, also known as Prague powder. This is sodium nitrite, and it's used in very, very small amounts. It's actually 1/4% of the weight of the meat. So if you've got a kilogram of meat, you're looking at about just 2.5 grams for that whole kilogram. It's a concentrated form of sodium nitrate, and they colour it pink on purpose in many countries around the world. Not all, some it just looks white like normal salt, but in many countries they now regulate that it has to be pink. so that it's instantly recognisable. This isn't table salt. You don't want to be shaking this on your, you know, on your food. In large quantities it can make you very, very ill. So yeah, very small amount of this, but what this will do, again, it will help to preserve that meat and ward off any nasties. So that's it. That's all the ingredients. I'm going to start just weighing out my aromatics and my salt, and I'll come back to you in a little bit. Hello. Well, I've weighed out all of the salt and the aromatics, and I've also prepared the bacteria culture. This is the actual packet it comes in. It's called Bactoferm T-SPX. It's a very fine powder, and you use 1/8 for a kilogram of meat, just 1/8 of a teaspoon, and you just dissolve it in about 2 tablespoonfuls of dechlorinated water. So just let your kettle boil and then let it cool to room temperature, and that just sits in there and it will start to rehydrate. It's a bit like homebrew in this, isn't it? Okay, so I've got my meat now. It's in the bowl. The bowl's clean and it's been sanitized with Star San. So all I'm going to do now is just mix in all the dry ingredients. Now this is a time where you may want to wear some rubber gloves. It can get a bit messy. I don't have any, so I'm just going to dive in. I've washed my hands and I've also sprayed them with some Star San just to be on the safe side. Okay, I like to, with the dry ingredients, I just like to sprinkle them in very slowly and then give it a mix and then sprinkle some more in, so it gets a nice even distribution. So there we go, that's enough for now, and then we just fold it over and get it all mixed in throughout. Put some more in. There we go, put it all in now, that's finished. And so yeah, we just mix now. Just mix this all through, get it, make sure it's as evenly distributed as possible. Right, so what I'm going to do is add the bacteria and continue to mix, and what you'll find is this bacteria, it will start to change the consistency of the meat even as you're massaging it in, and it will become sticky, very sticky, and a little bit sort of like rubbery and stiff. And that is going to take about 5 or 10 minutes, so I'll come back to you when it's done. Okay, I've finished mixing the mince. They say it's ready for stuffing when you can take a piece of the mince, put it on the palm of your hand, and it sticks to your hand like that. Then it's the right consistency for stuffing, whilst it's still sort of like breaking up into little pieces of mince and things like that. It's not ready. What I do when I'm mixing through the dry ingredients, I'm very careful with the mince, but after I've put the bacteria, the starter culture, in with the mince, I then squeeze it between my fingers and really start to squeeze it, and then after about 5 minutes you get this sticky mince. Anyway, so that's ready now for stuffing. So how do I stuff? Well, you can use traditional hog casings. However, I use these, they're called Umai Dry aging bags, and you can get actual big bags if you're doing like a big muscle of meat, like pork loin, or you can get these tubes for salamis. And it's a plastic, it's a special plastic that allows moisture to escape but doesn't allow moisture to come inside. So I think it's very good because it's also an extra barrier against any sort of pathogenic germs that that may want to try and get in. It's only one way, and that's inside to out. So I feel a bit more confident when I'm using these. But you can just use normal hog casings that you can get from a butcher's and just follow the instructions for the hog casing. Absolutely you can do that. But I use these plastic dry casings, and I just think they work. And it allows you also to dry these in a normal refrigerator. Whereas usually with hog casings, well, you can, but you really need a special sort of like chamber to keep them in. Right, so what I basically do is I just guesstimate lengths, and I cut them to size, and I've forgotten the scissors. Right, I'm back with the scissors. So usually a kilogram of mince will give me about 3 or 4 sausages. One thing though is obviously I'm restricted to the size of my fridge. So I usually make them, let me just cut this, something like that sort of a length. Obviously they're going to be bunched up at the ends, that sort of a length. So I'm just going to cut these, and then what we do is we tie up one end of each of these. You can use zip ties. In fact, the pack, this is my dry pack, comes with those very small zip ties, but not enough, and you run out of them quite quickly. So I just use butcher's twine, and all we're going to do, give that a twist, is just put a simple granny knot in. And then turn it over and do one on the other side. Like that. And then I'll cut it off here. And I'm just going to tie a loop so I can hang it up. I have these hooks that I stuck to the top of my fridge, so that these then will just hang in the fridge. Right, I'm going to do all the others. Okay, my 3 bags are tied. What we now have to do is stuff them. Now, surprisingly, you don't really need any sort of equipment to stuff these. You can just use a spoon and just literally just keep spooning in the mince and keep pressing it down, because it's important that these are airtight as possible. Let me just cut that piece of string off there because it's bugging me. There we go. So that's one way. Some people also cut the tops off, let's say like 2 litre pop bottles, and then they'll use the top part as like a funnel, and they'll put the funnel into here, and then, you know, push the meat in that way. You can obviously buy a proper sausage stuffer, but I use this. This is looks like a decorator's cork gun, but it's not. It's a jerky gun. It's food grade plastic, so if you do have a decorator's corker's gun, don't use it for this. This is food grade plastic, which is what you want, and it's all been sanitized with Star San. Oh, it's just the dogs barking again. It's all been sanitized with Star San, and it's just ready for stuffing. And to stuff it, it's very simple. You literally just stuff it. It can get a bit messy. I try and just hold the the tube with one hand and just use my right hand to pick up the mince, otherwise yeah, it would just be too much of a mess. But anyway, we stuff the tube until it's full, pushing it all the way down, and then what I'll do is I'll use the plunger to squeeze the air out before I start stuffing, because you don't really want any air pockets in the tube, because they will then transfer into the sausage, and if there's any bacteria in those air pockets, it's not going to be helpful. Make sure it's straight. I've sprayed it again with Star Sand just to be on the safe side, so if you see anything drip, that's just the Star Sand. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cover the end, usually with 2 fingers is fine, and I'm just going to keep pumping until I can really feel the pressure building up, and then I'll just release my fingers, and some of this is just going to come out because obviously that's the air now just being released and pushing out some of the meat. So pretty much that's airtight, it's packed with meat, and I can now move on to stuffing, which is really simple. Let me just put that down. You open up the opposite end from where you've tied, and then you just go all the way down to the bottom. Okay, maybe if I stand up and you can see this better. Okay, so I'm right down there in the bottom, and then I just pump with this hand, and I keep a little bit of tension all the way down to the bottom. Yep. And there's your first salami. Now obviously we've got to tie this end up as well, and when you're tying them it's best to grab a little bit of the meat to avoid any air pockets at the top. So I should have had another camera really, shouldn't have angled down, but what I'll do is I'll hold it up after and I'll show you what I mean. There we go. 2 simple granny knots like that. So as you can see, I've captured some of the meat. That can go back into the mixing bowl, and what it means then is that there's no air pockets at the top here. That's a little tip for you there. And that's it. There's my salami. Ready for weighing and hanging. Right, I'm going to finish all of them and then I'll get back to you. And here they are after being stuffed. I got 2.5 sausages, so I only used about 900 grams of mince this time. Usually I use 1 kilogram. But there they are, they're all finished and they're all ready for hanging. These will hang for 3 days in my kitchen at room temperature, around about 18 to 20 degrees. And then when they go a nice bright red colour, which they will because of the fermentation, then they're ready to go into the fridge on day 2 or day 3, and they'll stay there for about a month, about 4 weeks, until they have lost 30% of their weight. So what I'm actually going to do is actually weigh these and just have a little food tag that I attach to them with the weight on, and that way you can keep track of when they're ready to eat. So it could be in 3 weeks time that they've lost that 30%. Once you can't eat them until they have. That's very important. But once they've passed that 30% loss mark, then they're safe to eat. I actually prefer to wait till they're about 35 to 40% loss, but everyone's different. If you're at 30%, they're still very soft, whereas towards 40 they start to firm up a bit more, and that's what I enjoy. So these are going to go and hang now after I've weighed them, and then in about 2 or 3 days, when they've got a nice red colour, I'll put them in the fridge. When they're ready, I'll do a taste test. I do actually have some of these ready using exactly the same recipe, but they just need an extra week. I'm hoping they'll be ready today, but they're not. They just need to lose a little bit more weight, and then they'll be ready, and then it'll have lost about 35% of its original weight. What I do have though is the beef salami that I made. This is how they look when they come out of these bags, because you can't eat, obviously this is plastic, you can't eat the wrapping, so you take the wrapping off. And this has lost about 40% now of its weight, and it's just lovely. It's beautiful. Fresh salami, you can't beat it. Anyway, that's how I'll make salami. I'll put the recipe down below. Although if you do buy the umami sausage pack, it's about £20 for the pack, and you get the culture, you get the instacure #2 pink salt, and of course you get about 5 meters worth of sausage casings, which will make quite a lot of sausage. But they do also come with a recipe pack, a recipe chart, and also a how-to guide. Opens out like that, step-by-step instructions. So I find it good value, and I get a bit more peace of mind from this casing that no bad stuff's going to get in. So I don't mind spending that 20 odd quid. They're not paying me to say this though, by the way. It's just what I use. You can use hog casings perfectly well. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching. Hope you found it interesting. Hope you've maybe wanted to give it a go yourself. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye for now.